All right. So, the good news just keeps on coming. So, the U.S. Drug Control Agency will move to reclassify marijuana in a historic shift. So, which is good news. Now, obviously, it's not removing it from the classification altogether or anything weird like that. It's just declassifying it. Well, reclassifying it, I should say. The U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency will move to reclassify marijuana as a less dangerous drug. The Associated Press has learned a historic shift to generations of American drug policy that could have wide ripple effects across the country. Which again is great. Because previously I think it's been up there with coke and meth and yeah. The most dangerous drug that man has ever known, according to the classifications, if I'm recalling it correctly. So, which marijuana is not. Marijuana is not that dangerous of a drug. Obviously, not everybody can use it. Some people have bad side effects from it, like any other drug ever. But it is still good news because this was disingenuous from the very beginning. Because we were on a war on drugs, and obviously all drugs are bad because reasons. So anyway, enough rambling and let's get to continue with the article. The DEA's proposal which still must be reviewed by the White House Office of Management and Budget, would recognize the medical use of cannabis and acknowledge it has less potential for abuse than some of the nation's most dangerous drugs. However, it would not legalize marijuana outright for recreational use. Now, I wonder if one of those nation's most dangerous drugs, if they're just referring to illegal drugs, or if they're referring to alcohol. Because alcohol is a very dangerous drug. And it's very addictive and rife for abuse. Mainly because it's legal. Now, I am not in any way, shape, or form suggesting that alcohol should be prohibited, because we tried that. It worked really, really well. So well that Al Capone became Al Capone. So yeah, would never suggest that. I'm just saying that the way we classify what's dangerous and what isn't consistent. So, let us continue. The agency's move, confirmed to the AP on Tuesday by 5 people familiar with the matter who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss the sensitive regulatory review, clears the last significant regulatory hurdle before the agency's biggest policy change in more than 50 years can take effect. Now, for a lot of people who are very, very unhappy with Biden for sometimes legitimate, sometimes not legitimate reasons, this could also help him. Obviously, this isn't Biden's doing it per se, but it is his administration, so. Once OMB signs off, the DEA will take public comment on the plan to move marijuana from its current classification as a Schedule I drug alongside heroin and LSD. Oh, it's even worse than I thought. It moves pot to Schedule III alongside ketamine and some anabolic steroids, following a recommendation from the Federal Health and Human Services Department. After the public comment period and a review by an administrative judge, the agency would eventually publish the final rule. And I'd love to know what eventually means. It comes after President Joe Biden called for a review of federal marijuana law in October 2022 and moved to pardon thousands of Americans convicted federally of simple possession of the drug. So, like I said, it's his administration, and he apparently got the ball rolling. So, yeah, this should help Biden with a lot of people. He has also called on governors and local leaders to take similar steps to erase marijuana convictions. Because it's stupid to convict someone of possessing. Now, obviously, if they commit a crime while high on drugs, well, they're committing a crime. The fact that they're on drugs is completely immaterial. So, yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. Criminal records for marijuana use and possession have imposed needless barriers to employment, housing, and educational opportunities, Biden said in December. Too many lives have been upended because of our failed approach to marijuana. It's time that we right these wrongs. The election year announcement could help Biden, a Democrat, boost flagging support, particularly among young voters. Absolutely. At least the ones that aren't just inconsolable and protesting the Gaza war. Those might not be so forgiving. Biden and a growing number of lawmakers from both major political parties have been pushing for the DEA's decision as marijuana has become increasingly decriminalized and accepted, particularly by young people. And there are states that actually have decriminalized marijuana. A Gallup poll last fall found 70% of adults support legalization, the highest level yet recorded by the polling firm, and more than double the roughly 30% who backed it in 2000. The DEA didn't respond to repeated requests for comment. Schedule III drugs are still controlled substances and subject to rules and regulations, and people who traffic in them without permission could still face federal criminal prosecution. Which, again, makes me wonder if alcohol is a part of this. Because it is a controlled substance. So, some critics argue the DEA shouldn't change course on marijuana, saying rescheduling it isn't necessary and can lead to harmful side effects. Like what? People are using it anyway. What harmful side effects could there possibly be that isn't already happening to some people who use marijuana? Jack Riley, a deputy administrator of the DEA, said he had concerns about the proposed change because he thinks marijuana remains a possible gateway drug, one that may lead to the use of other drugs. Okay, that's an old myth. It is not a gateway drug. You know, the people who tell me that they smoke and use alcohol at the same time, I've seen much more of that. I don't hear those stories about marijuana. So tell me again how it's a gateway drug? I mean, sure, maybe some who use marijuana might experiment, but it's not like they immediately are like, oh, this is cool, I'm going to try LSD. No. And the people who use heroin are the ones who get hooked on it when they take opioids after surgery. So, should we classify opiates that are medically necessary? Should we classify them as a gateway drug? Seriously, no. That's not how this works. But in terms of us getting clear to use our resources to combat other major drugs, that's a positive, Riley said, noting that fentanyl alone accounts for more than 100,000 deaths in the U.S. a year. Well, at least he understands that there are more pressing issues. So that's good. That's a positive. On the other end of the spectrum, others argue marijuana should be treated the way alcohol is. Oh, so it's not a Schedule III drug. Okay. I just assumed that because it's a drug, that it's a controlled substance and subject to this, but apparently not. Last week, 21 Democrats led by Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer of New York sent a letter to the DEA Administrator Ann Milgram and Attorney General Merrick Garland arguing marijuana should be dropped from the controlled substances list and instead regulated like alcohol. Okay? That actually sounds reasonable. It is time for the DEA to act, the lawmakers wrote. Right now, the administration has the opportunity to resolve more than 50 years of failed, racially discriminatory marijuana policy. Are we saying that the majority of marijuana users is black? Is that what we're saying? I honestly don't know the statistics, so I'm not going to say yes or no to that. But that sounds like what it's saying. Federal drug policy has lagged behind many states in recent years, with 38 having already legalized medical marijuana and 24 legalizing its recreational use. Yes, and Wisconsin has neighbors that you can get marijuana from, but Wisconsin is being steadfastly anti-marijuana because somehow the state lines are borders that people can't just go to another state and get marijuana. I don't know. But yes, it should be legalized. It's just ridiculous that we have this hodgepodge. It's legal in some states, it's not in others. Because interstate travel exists. It's a thing. And you don't have to pass customs to declare that you have so much marijuana in your possession. So it's just stupid to have this states doing their own drug policy. That's helped fuel fast growth in the marijuana industry, with an estimated worth of nearly $30 billion. Easing federal regulations could reduce the tax burden that can be 70% or more for businesses, according to industry groups. It could also make it easier to research marijuana, since it's very difficult to conduct authorized clinical studies on Schedule I substances. Another joy of the war on drugs, people who claim, oh, marijuana hasn't been studied. Yeah, there's a reason for that. And let's face it, it's another source of tax revenue, because now you can tax businesses that grow marijuana just like any other business. So that's extra revenue, and that in theory could decrease the tax burden on everybody else. So anyway, moving on. The immediate effect of rescheduling on the nation's criminal justice system would likely be more muted, since federal prosecutions for simple possessions have been fairly rare in recent years. Okay. But loosening restrictions could carry a host of unintended consequences in the drug war and beyond. You mean the drug war that's been lost? Okay. Critics point out that as a Schedule III drug, marijuana would remain regulated by the DEA. That means that roughly 15,000 cannabis dispensaries in the U.S. would have to register with the DEA like regular pharmacies and fulfill strict reporting requirements, something that they are loath to do and that the DEA is ill equipped to handle. Oh, that's what you mean. Okay, that sounds reasonable. All the more reason to kick it off the list. Then there's the United States international treaty obligations, chief among them the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs, which requires the criminalization of cannabis. Really? I'm sure there's a lot of countries who'd be like, we've rethought our stance on that. In 2016, during the Obama administration, the DEA cited the U.S.'s international obligations and the findings of a federal court of appeals in Washington in denying a similar request to reschedule marijuana. And that's the end of the article. And yeah, I mean, can't you go back and redo that treaty? You know, saying, oh yeah, I don't know how this meeting would occur. I don't know what other countries are a part of this, but why can't they get together and say, yeah, we rethought this and let's just not consider marijuana a narcotic and let's kick it off the list. I mean, let's face it, the Netherlands has legal marijuana. And I don't know if they're part of this treaty, but, you know, they've done it. So I just don't see why the treaty just can't be reworked to exclude marijuana. So, you know, to say, oh, we have an international obligation. That's just saying, yeah, it's too hard to do shit. Why don't you get together with the other parties to this treaty and decide whether you want to take marijuana off the list? Yeah, I just do not see how that is a significant roadblock. It is a roadblock, but it can be dealt with. I just don't see how that should be the main concern. It just makes no sense to me. Anyway, that's all I have on that subject. So with that, I will see you in the next video.